Hi, so I wanted to just share my story today on YouTube because I found comfort in watching other people's stories similar to mine on YouTube. So, for those of you that do not know and are watching this, I gave birth to my stillborn son on March 5th of this year, 2017, and I was 21 weeks pregnant. He weighed 12 ounces and was 9 inches long. So I'm just going to talk about his condition and pretty much just my story. I'm not going to share too much of the what happened in the pregnancy because my pregnancy was quite dramatic. I mean, I was quite healthy. It's just a lot of different events happened during my pregnancy. For those people that do know me, know a little bit more about that. But, anyways, when I found out I was pregnant, I was quite early, I think about 3 or 4 weeks. And at first, I was nervous. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. Um, I told the baby's father and I told my family and whatnot, and people were quite nervous for me because I'm on my own with my two children, and their ages were at the time 1.5 and 3.5. So people were quite nervous for me, but all in all, I was excited, and as time progressed, I got even more excited. So, excuse me. Um, I had my first ultrasound, which was my dating ultrasound, around 7 weeks, and they confirmed that I was pregnant and that everything seemed to be going okay and checked for whatever else. So then time went on, and I was referred to an OB in London, Dr. Easterbrook, the doctor that I had for my son Caleb. And we planned to have our first visit around 19 weeks. And so I was about 18 weeks, and I decided I couldn't wait any longer and I wanted to go and find out what the gender of the baby was. So we went and we found out that we were having a baby boy. That evening I decided I was going to name him Nash, and I decided on his middle names later. So I was going to name him Nash, and at this point we were super excited. I had just finally moved into um, a new place and a nice 3-bedroom apartment, and I decided that I was going to give my boys the bigger room, so I moved my toddler Caleb into the bigger room and my daughter into the smaller room so that the boys could share the bigger room together and have more space. So time went on, and when I was 20 weeks pregnant, so only 2 weeks after we found out that we were having a boy, I had my anatomy scan. So I went into the ultrasound and she did her thing. And at that point, I kind of had a weird feeling because she took longer than what I felt it should have took. And I also asked, what did I ask? I was asking questions and stuff, and she really just couldn't give me the type of answer that she wanted to. And she said that she couldn't get some of the measurements, so that maybe I would be coming back and whatnot. But, anyways, we wrapped up that ultrasound, and I went home. And a week went by, and it was Friday, February 24th, which was my birthday. The kids were gone for the night before, and I was lying in bed when my phone rang, and I answered it, and it was my family doctor. So I was on the phone with her, and she says, Megan, I'm sorry to tell you this over the phone, but I figured that this was the best way, seeing that you're an hour drive. She said, the baby has a skull malformation, and I'm very sorry to have to tell you this. My heart dropped into my stomach, and I didn't know how to respond. I just kind of gasped, and I said, Doctor, is my baby going to be okay? And she said, I don't know. And at that time, I felt my whole world crumbling down on me. I didn't know if this baby was going to be okay, if he was going to survive, if he was going to live, if he was going to live, was he going to live an okay life, a decent quality life. So I said, well, what type of condition is this, or what can you tell me about it? And she said, all we know at this time is that it's a malformation of the skull, meaning that the skull didn't form correctly. And I said, well, what is the severity of it? How severe is it? And she said, it's quite severe. And she told me to prepare myself for the next coming weeks and choices I was going to have to make and decisions I was going to have to make for myself and my son. So we got off the phone and I cried to myself for a few minutes. And then I called my mom and I told her, and she came right over. And that was honestly probably one of the longest days of my life. And it was my 24th birthday, and I had to hear that news. So that was quite terrible. I later called my boyfriend and I told him, and I let all the important people know what was going on and that something wasn't okay, but we didn't know what exactly at this point. So that was the Friday, and they had me scheduled for the the Tuesday for an ultrasound in London. So we had to go through the weekend being upset, not really knowing anything, not having any answers, and I could feel Nash kicking in my stomach, and I just couldn't believe, I could feel him, and I could feel how active he was, but that something so terrible could possibly be wrong. So Tuesday came and we went to my appointment in London, and we prepared ourselves to hear the worst news, but hoped for the best. So we went into the ultrasound. Well, I went in alone, and she sort of just looked around and she talked to me a little bit and made me feel better. And then she asked me if I wanted my boyfriend and my mom to come in to see the ultrasound and talk with the doctor also, because the doctor was going to come in next. And I said yes. So she went and got my mom and my boyfriend and brought the doctor in, and they showed us the defect, and they called it encephalocele. So what it is when your brain doesn't completely form together and your brain grows outside of your skull, and there's lots of different kinds of encephalocele. There's not lots of different kinds, but there's mild to severe kind of thing. And Nash's encephalocele was extremely severe. It was almost his entire brain that grew outside of his skull. And later we learned that this happens at the very beginning of pregnancy. Approximately around 7 weeks is when all that sort of starts forming. So, anyways, encephalocele, sometimes known as cranium bifidum, is a neural tube defect characterized by sac-like protrusions of the brain and the membranes that cover it through openings in the skull. These defects are caused by failure of the neural tube to close completely during fetal development. From what I've read, they're not 100% sure what causes this, but it's more common in women with medical problems, and I have diabetes, so it could be caused by that. It's also it can be caused by environmental issues or whatnot, so the air, or smoking, or anything that is like that, or it could be a gene that possibly triggered this defect. So really it could be a bunch of different things, and we may not ever know. So anyways, the doctor looked at me and I said, well, what's going to happen now? And he looked at my mom and looked at my boyfriend and then looked back at me and he said, well, your baby's condition isn't compatible with life. And right there and then I just started bawling. Everything just came crashing down. I, at this point, had moved my son into the bigger bedroom and was excited for my boys to share a room, and I was thinking about how I was going to design their bedroom and what kind of theme, and I was thinking about whether or not they'd one day go to camp together, or if Nash would play soccer and Caleb would play basketball and Kinley would be in dance. Like, I dreamt about these things for weeks and weeks and weeks, and now to hear this, so we wrapped up the ultrasound, and a lot of what happened next was a blur, but we basically had some different options to choose from. And at this point, being 21 weeks pregnant with a very, very, very sick baby, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went home and I thought about it. We decided that we were gonna go in and be induced and have the baby. At this point, there was also something wrong with the placenta and the umbilical cord, and he wasn't getting the nutrients he needed. And throughout the next couple of days, I eventually stopped feeling him kick so much, and we went into the hospital, and so we went into like the London hospital, and they couldn't find a heartbeat. I really wanted a print off of his heartbeat at some point, but at this point they weren't able to get it. So I'm not sure how prepared I was for what happened next. I wasn't physically prepared. I wasn't mentally prepared. I wasn't emotionally prepared. But you can only be so prepared for your world to come crashing down around you. People keep on saying that I'm so strong, but I'm not. And when you're going through something like that, you have to be strong. You have no choice. There's nothing you can do. When you're pregnant and you're that pregnant and your child's heartbeat stops, or they have like a defect that's not compatible with life, or whatever the case might be, you have no choice. What's done is done, and you can't go back. So yeah, so it was the Saturday that we went into the hospital, and she checked 3 times for his heartbeat and couldn't find it. And so they started to induce me, and they did that by inserting a pill into my cervix every 4 hours. And it was, the first pill was inserted at 2 p.m. and then the second one was at 6 p.m. and just around 6 p.m. is when my labor sort of started. I started getting cramps and whatnot, and every couple hours from then they gave me another pill, like inserted it into my cervix. So around 4 a.m. My labor started to get like extremely intense, and I started throwing up. And also throughout all this, I had a really bad fever and chills, and I was always hot and always warm. And apparently that's a side effect of the medication they gave me. So a little while passed. Kinley keeps on interrupting. So anyways, a little while passed, and I felt the need to push, and it felt like I needed to go poop. So I told the nurse that I needed to go to the washroom, and she said, well, let me get the doctor so that she can check you and make sure that you aren't actually feeling the baby rather than feeling like you have to go to the washroom. So she came in, and sure enough, the baby was right there. She told me I can push on my next contraction, so I did, and uh, eventually the water sac broke. They were telling me that he was going to come out in the water sac, but apparently it broke during that one push. So I pushed for about an hour, and soon enough, out came Nash. For how small he was, I definitely felt him. I have never gone through anything like that because both of my children were C-sections. Both of my other children were C-sections, I mean. While I was pushing him out, I had my boyfriend sitting on the couch, sort of just watching and being there. And then my mom was over my shoulder and she was crying. And I just kept on telling her to stop crying because for me, I sort of felt almost a sense of peace come over me. I was pushing my son out. It was honestly the strangest feeling I have ever felt before, actually. Like, I was sad, but I was happy that I was finally going to be able to see him, if that makes sense. And at this point, I've already accepted what was happening, and I've already went through it all in my head and whatnot. So I pushed him out, and all I remember is the room getting really, really quiet. And this is the type of quiet that hurts your ears. Like, imagine a quiet room where a screaming baby is supposed to be but isn't. It was heart-wrenching, and I wouldn't wish it among my worst enemy. So my OB took him, and they asked me if I wanted to have him on my chest or if I wanted them to clean him up first. And I wanted them to clean him up, so they brought him over to the one area, and they did that. And Dr. Easterbrook said, it's a baby boy, and he was born stillborn. And those were the words that I knew I was going to hear, but I really just did not want to hear. Obviously, words that nobody would ever want to hear. So while they were over cleaning him up and stuff, I asked them about his appearance so that I could prepare myself mentally. And they said, he looks great. He has 10 fingers and 10 toes. He has a cute little nose and some cute little ears and lots of hair. So I pretty much just asked about his appearance so that I could prepare myself for that. And eventually they brought him over. And so after you deliver a stillborn in the hospital, you're allowed to hold him as long as you want. But I held him for about an hour before I asked the nurse to take him because I felt the longer that I would hold him, the harder it would be to let him go. And so I tried my best to memorize him in every way that I could, and he really did have the cutest little nose and fingers and toes and whatnot. And I felt almost peaceful holding him. So yeah, that's pretty much my story. I'm going to show you guys some of the things that the hospital gives you when when you give birth to a stillborn. So you get this box, and it will say baby boy or baby girl on the front. That's what it looks like on the inside. And I found this bear that used to be, or that was mine when I was little, and this is pretty much how big he was. He was about this size. So you get a little hat, and this is actually the hat that he wore when I was holding him. And then you get this little blanket. It's called an angel pouch, and he wore that, or he was wrapped in that when I was holding him. Here's his handprints. So they're very, very tiny. And then you get your little card with the information on it. Then you get this little card, a little card saying sorry for your loss and whatnot. This was a piece of paper that I had sitting on the bed. It says, "My name is Nash Solomon." It means peace. Solomon means peace. And then you get another little card with his footprints. Another thing you get is a little mold of their handprints and footprints. You get this little butterfly. This little butterfly goes on the door of your hospital room so that people know that there's been a loss. You get this very tiny receiving blanket. He never used that. It's just in there. And then you get a little blanket like this. And then you get some slippers, but these were way too big for him. I had my son cremated, and he was cremated in a warm little blanket that the hospital gave him. And I have a shelf downstairs for him to keep his memory alive. So anyways, I just, like I said, wanted to make this video so that anybody else could watch it and feel maybe a little bit better about their loss. Maybe feel like they aren't alone. Like I said, I've watched some videos of people speaking of their story, and that definitely brought some comfort to me. So anyways, thank you for listening.